It only took 2 days, technically a day and a half, for Donald Trump to be gagged by Judge Engoron in his New York fraud trial. It all happened after Trump went on Truth Social and posted the name, photograph, and Instagram account of the judge's principal law clerk. The post attacked the clerk for being in a photograph with the Senate Majority Leader, Democrat Chuck Schumer. Then Trump went to the cameras outside the courthouse and continued his invective.
They rigged the trial. It's a fraudulent trial. The Attorney General is a fraud. And we have to expose her as that. You see what's going on? It's a rigged deal. Frankly, you saw what was just put out about Schumer and the principal clerk. That is disgraceful.
Now, Judge Engoron did not take any of this lightly, calling the attacks unacceptable and inappropriate. He ordered Trump to remove the post. And according to NBC News, the judge told the court to consider this a gag order on all parties with respect to posting or publicly speaking about any member of my staff. The judge said that violations of this order would lead to swift, meaningful sanctions. I am joined now by former acting Solicitor General Neal Katyal. Neal, first of all, it's great to see you in person. New York City is where all the action is, legally speaking, haven't you heard? First of all, meaningful sanctions. What does that practically mean?
Well, it could mean, in an ordinary thing, if there's a gag order imposed and it's violated, it means putting someone in jail. Now, a gag order, Alex, is really hard to get in a case. Like, I don't think I've ever seen it in any of my 1,000+ cases. Yeah, I mean, because people know, like, they use common sense. And, you know, it's kind of like failing kindergarten. To get a gag order imposed, you got to kind of try.
Trump work at it.
Yeah, Trump managed to work at it and do it and succeed. But it took a lot of work on his part. And now I think the judge is basically saying, you attack a member of my staff and there will be serious sanctions, and including even up to jail.
Well, and yet, as hard as it is to get the gag order, I think it's the broad expectation that Trump is inevitably going to violate it in some fashion or slander some other person involved in this case, whether it's the prosecution or the judge himself.
Yeah.
So would your expectation be that this is going to be kind of the, you know, a laddering up of a punitive ladder up in terms of the judge issuing more gag orders until at some point he is forced to do something more drastic?
Yes, exactly. So basically, like, if we're going to ask, is Trump going to violate the gag order? Almost certainly, yes. I mean, it's more likely that he'll violate the gag order than almost anything, like than George Santos being the next speaker. I mean, we're talking, you know, a significant probability he's going to violate the gag order. And then the question is, will the judge at that point take the really heavy medicine of putting a former president in jail? Or will there be some sort of warning and monetary fine first? I expect the latter, but it does really depend on exactly how Trump violates it.
Well, and isn't Trump's sort of goal, his existential goal, to stress test institutions? And the judicial branch is no exception to that. The idea that, you know, part of this is he feeds off of this controversy. He gains strength from disruption. And I mean, honestly, can you say as a lawyer that we as a country could really face a possibility of a former president, criminal defendant being put in jail? That just seems, as necessary as that may ultimately be, that seems really hard to fathom.
Right. Your diagnosis of the problem seems exactly right to me. Trump is a kind of Voldemort-like figure who, like, gets his strength by basically attacking institutions. And he does it here. He's doing it in Washington, D.C. with the January 6th trial, of which there's another potential gag order and a hearing on that's coming up. So, yes, that's how Trump acts. And you know, judges are loath to jail anyone, you know, particularly before a jury convicts, or here it's a bench trial that would, you know, a judge finding a guilt. So you don't like to do stuff in advance. But when you have a litigant who behaves this way, you got no other choice. And let me just tell you, if this were any other litigant, we would already see serious sanctions, perhaps even jail at this point.
You mentioned Judge Tanya Chutkan, who's overseeing the federal case against Trump and his activities around the 2020 election. She's having a hearing on October 16th to sort of determine whether or not there's going to be punitive measures taken against Trump. The prosecution, the DOJ, would very much like the president to be censored in some way. Are judges watching each other's behavior in this? Like, does Judge Engoron in the Tish James case sort of set a precedent for Judge Chutkan, or are these sort of separate and apart from one another?
Well, the technical answer is they're separate and apart from one another. What happens in one trial shouldn't carry over and spill over into the next, but they do, of course. Judges are human beings. And every time you cross a threshold, other jurisdictions watch. So, for example, it's New York that crossed the threshold of indicting a former president. Never been done before, but the Manhattan District Attorney, Alvin Bragg, does that. And then, lo and behold, you see indictments in other jurisdictions, both federal and Fulton County, Georgia, as a result. Here, this judge has taken the step of issuing a gag order against the former president. Yes, this is a New York civil trial, but you can bet dollars to donuts that Judge Chutkan, a very, very respected judge in D.C., is watching these proceedings and thinking, you know, I'm going to wind up in this mess, too, with a defendant who's mouthing himself off, attacking my clerks, attacking me, and the like. She's incredibly careful, and I think tried to do everything to avoid a showdown. But that showdown is now looking inevitable. And as you say, on October 16th, there will be a hearing. And I do expect at that point there will be some sort of order imposed on Donald Trump because the court can't tolerate this. And Trump is expecting. He's sitting there saying to himself, I'll bring this to the Supreme Court, my sanctions and the like. It's my free speech. He will lose that every day of the week. This is the Supreme Court, you know, regardless, people have disagreements about various things, abortion, whatever, but they really care about the decorum of court proceedings, the legitimacy of courts, and they will not stand for this kind of behavior with a court, with a federal judge.
Yeah, and they've proven themselves to be particularly sensitive to criticism lobbed from the outside at the justices, right? Whether that criticism is warranted or not, one would imagine they would be sympathetic to the judges in this case, who may be the recipients of Trump's slander. There is the kind of libelous rhetoric or threatening rhetoric that Trump issues forth on social media. But there's also the fact, Neil, that he's been in this courtroom and he's kind of a big presence in this civil case. He's outside on the court steps. He's doing his version of tweeting. I got to wonder, I think it's clear that this New York civil case deeply affects him, perhaps because it's a financial case. But do you think that you could make the case that his presence in the courtroom, the things he's saying on the courtroom steps, are themselves a form of intimidation here?
Well, I would distinguish between what he's doing in court and out of court.
Yeah.
Because in court, he has an absolute right to be there. It's his trial. Absolutely. If he wants to be there and watch the proceedings, he should. And he obviously cares about how he's perceived on his net worth. And so, you know, that's fine. The stuff he's doing outside the courtroom, I have a real problem with it. I think any second grader knows that you don't go and attack the judge in your case. That is not an appropriate way to behave. But Trump lacks the dignity even of a second grader. And I do think it's a real problem. But, you know, if he continues with the attacks, and this gag order appears to only apply to attacks on the staff, not on the judge.
Right.
If he keeps attacking the judge, I do expect yet another gag order to be filed, this time about the judge.
Can they stop him from coming to court?
I don't think they can ban him from the courtroom. It's a civil trial. You have an absolute right in a criminal trial to be present for your own case. Civil, I think it's a more complicated question, but he's not going to be banned from attending his own trial.
The only upshot is it's supposed to take several months, and he's going to be busy with other cases in the meantime. Neil Katyal, no disrespect to kindergartners and second graders.
Absolutely.
With a first grader in a kindergarten, I can say they're behaving a little bit better than some people. Thank you for your time. It's great to see you, Neil.